Welcome back to Raised by Giants Illuminated Insights Interview. We are live. Welcome everyone in the chat. Good to see you guys and any moderators out there. We have a very special collaboration episode for you guys today. But before I introduce him, I want to thank Debbie for the kind and generous $10 PayPal donation. Really appreciate your support and kindness, Debbie. And a $5 tip on Rokfin from Terry. Thanks so much for your support of the show, Terry. If you're watching on Rokfin, the tip option is always available. And if you're watching on YouTube, super chats and super stickers are available as well. And any super chat or super sticker will be read out during the show. Also, PayPal and Buy Me a Coffee links are in the description as well and are always appreciated. I couldn't do this without your guys' support. And I am very excited about the show today. We're going to peel back the onion of where these thoughts and these ideas of extraterrestrial intervention, galactic ships coming to save humanity, ascension, new earth, and a lot of these new age belief systems that started. And we're going to be doing that with the author and researcher on the origins of occult beliefs of Christianity, Gnosticism, and the Kabbalah. He has published more than 20 books on these subjects. Christopher Jon Bjerknes, welcome back to the show. It's good to see you, my friend.
Thank you so much for having me on. This is going to be a killer show.
Yeah, I think so too. And it's a new show, the same channel. So, and this is going to be a great discussion, brother. And you've been on the show before a few times. So you always come with that super heavy hitting knowledge, brother.
Oh, thank you so much. And I'm fascinated by the research that you've been doing into the modern origins of ufology, where all this is coming from and where it's deliberately heading.
Yeah, what got me interested in this topic of cults, and more specifically UFO cults, was when I critically analyzed modern ufology, Christopher, and realized that the UFO and extraterrestrial believers that are out there that's touting disclosure, one, they have no proof and no evidence, right?
It's faith-based, which makes it a religion.
Yes, and it's just a bunch of stories. You know, it's based on belief, and the stories that have been brought into the zeitgeist of the modern day, right? Regurgitation after regurgitation, right? And there's no photographic evidence, no video evidence of any extraterrestrial. No one has ever met an extraterrestrial that you can walk out and shake hands with, that you can reach out and touch, right? It's always in an altered state of consciousness somehow, right? A dream state, a meditative state. And what I think a lot of it is under the influence of some sort of drug, right?
And as you pointed out, it could also be the government staging things to freak people out, to play games with their minds. There are a lot of con artists and hustlers. It's an industry. They're making all kinds of money off of it. They copy one another. They regurgitate the same narrative over and over and over again. The government is clearly involved in it. And these cults, it's easy to trace out the religious beliefs that are being expressed through these cults. So they're serving as a cover for messianic prophecies, Kabbalistic beliefs, and Gnostic, Platonic beliefs. And all this began in the 1800s. The Theosophical Society was also a cover for these occultic beliefs. The socialist movement was a cover for occultic beliefs. Mormonism has a lot of these beliefs written into it. A lot of this was sponsored by major financiers, so there was always tremendous amounts of money behind it. And there are clear agendas behind it, which mirror the messianic aspirations of the Gnostics and the Kabbalists.
Yeah, and then I was thinking too, I was like, you know, Christopher, if all this stuff is true, right? And if these physical abductions, because the physical abductions started with Betty and Barney Hill in 1961, you know, by extraterrestrials are happening like everyone claims that they are, then why hasn't anything been done about it, right? If something's going on like that, that's legitimately out there abducting people out of their bed at night and doing all these experimentations and on their DNA and collecting their genetic material. Why haven't anyone said anything or done anything about it, right? That would be the first thing that you would think that would be happening, right? And it's probably because there's zero proof and zero evidence of it happening, right? And if there's zero proof and zero evidence, and it's just stories and just reports, then did it really happen, right? Which, when you mix in the MK Ultra, the traumatization, the drugs, and the need and the want to believe in something, then you have a recipe for fake made up stories that didn't really happen and then get accepted by the public over time as real. And that's what it sounds like, right? And that's exactly what this all religions really are, right? And it seems like a religious movement right from the very start.
And it's always people who have been exposed to the previous stories that they mimic. If you have a Buddhist who's dying, he sees Buddhist visions. A Christian will see Christ. So all these things are implanted in the mind. And whether people are sincere or not, it's like post-hypnotic suggestions. And they simply reflect what they've already been told. And this whole idea of abduction is very similar to the dispensationalist Christian conception of the rapture. And I think that that could be a very dangerous aspect of all this. Should any nefarious force want to, they can scapegoat the aliens. And on the other hand, they can also say it was the rapture. And these people are actually either cursed or blessed to have been abducted or raptured. So we need to expose this mythology, its roots, and the potential dangers of it. Because if I disappear tomorrow, they could claim I was abducted by an alien. And that's where we're headed with the government now agreeing with all of these scripted delusions, because that sets the public up for this kind of behavior.
Exactly. I agree with that so much. And, what happened is I was getting attacked on social media for bringing a lot of this stuff to light and giving my people, giving people my thoughts and my ideas around it. That one, UFOs are more than likely advanced military craft, right? That abductions are MK Ultra experiments ran by the CIA, and later on, after 1985, when the MK Ultra program was shut down, that was picked up by the Air Force and is still in operation till this very day, and no one knows about it because they've never been made to come clean about what they were doing with MK Ultra. But why would the Air Force be interested in doing MK Ultra experiments, right? Unless it involves something with the air, right? And and the DARPA has technology to implant images and auditory messages directly into your head, right? Via Project Blue Bolt, which was the original project name for Project Bluebeam, right? Through the administration of pharmaceutical drugs and technology, right? And then I started researching into the percentage of people that are on pharmaceutical drugs in the United States, right? From a study done from 2014 to 2016. And this isn't even counting illicit drugs. Americans buy and use more drugs per person than any other country in the world. Up to 64% of adults in the United States is on some form of pharmaceutical drug, right? And those are administered in the United States, right? And some of the most prescribed medications, right, are antipsychotics, antidepressants, and amphetamine. And guess where the experimentation of those drugs came from? They came directly out of the MK Ultra programs. And what do they immediately put your children on when they're having problems in school? They immediately put them on Adderall. They immediately put them on Ritalin, which came directly out of these programs. But I'm sure that's just a coincidence, right? That America is the most medicated country in the world, but somehow has the most paranormal and UFO extraterrestrial contactees, channelers, and New Age movements out of any country ever. It's just a coincidence,
was
right?
it George Orwell or Aldous Huxley who said that pharmaceuticals would be used to manipulate the masses psychologically?
Yep.
One of those two. And LSD and hallucinogens were also utilized by the CIA. They were experimenting on blacks and soldiers to see if they could make them fight better. The Russians have done, and the Soviets did a lot of very similar things. And all of this is to demoralize the public, to make it impossible for the public to decipher what is real and what is not. Even when you present the facts to them, they can't, as you pointed out, it becomes cognitive dissonance. They can't decipher what is real or not. And this also reminds me very heavily of Orwell, in which he said, Winston, the character, says that if you are free, you can say that 2 + 2 = 4. But in the end, after his soul is broken and he is physically and mentally abused, he scribbles 2 + 2 = 5 in the dust. And they have all kinds of agents on the internet trying to intimidate people, smear people, and harass people so that they don't point out the fact that this ufology is nonsense, that it has an agenda, and it has a nefarious and religious agenda. And the same is true of the flat earth mythologies. They have these people who go around, harass, intimidate, smear, and try to keep people like me from ever getting interviews so that we can't expose these facts. And it's very Orwellian. It's very much insistent that everyone agree to say things which aren't true, which obviously aren't true, and ultimately to believe things which are obviously not true.
Absolutely. I think Yuri Bezmenov talked about that as well, the 4 steps to subvert an entire country. You're familiar with this
Yes,
symbol,
the Raelian
right?
symbol that got yay taken off of Twitter. It's also very similar to the Theosophical Society symbol.
So this dude, his name's Riel, and he started a UFO cult called Raelianism. And he claimed that these extraterrestrial beings came that were called Elohim, and that they had this symbol, which is a mixture of 2 different symbols, as you see. And they had that symbol on their ships. They had that symbol on their armband whenever he met the extraterrestrial Elohim beings that came off of the ship, and told him that he needed to build a landing pad for them to come to Earth, and that they were going to land on Earth. And this is the landing pad that his cult made. There's another picture of it. And the most interesting aspect of this, Christopher, was in 2001, he founded this company called Clonaid. And this company claimed that they can clone human beings. And apparently they did. And that baby was called Eve. But the problem is that it couldn't be scientifically studied. They didn't let any scientific studies go on this child. They just presented her to the public, and this really boosted. You can look this up, Clonaid, online. It's a real website. It's a real company, and it was founded by this dude Rael from this Raelian cult that started in 1970. And that really boosted his whole cult ideas and thoughts and theories. And he claims, they claim to have cloned several hundreds of people, and they're living like all over the world, which I do find kind of fascinating, because there's this rapper, I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but his name's Kid Buu. And he claims to have been cloned by this Clonaid company. And
I'm not familiar with that, but I am familiar with the Kabbalistic and the old notions of creating homunculi of the alchemists, which go way back to the Greeks and the idea of bees coming out of dead cattle. And this idea that life forms can be created from seed, that the mother only provides the womb and the blood which nourishes the seed, and therefore you can create artificial beings in this way called homunculus, or homunculi is the plural. They also have this idea of molding the clay of chaos into a golem. And the ambition of the Kabbalists is to create 600,000 immortal androgynes out of their Messiah's DNA, and they are developing means of converting skin cells into egg cells that could then be combined with the seed of their messianic figure, just like these Raelians, to generate 600,000 immortal androgynes that will have both male and female characteristics and will never perish by natural means. So I think that all of this is forwarding this very same agenda. The Raelians are very messianic. They have the concept of rebuilding the temple and creating a better world, very similar to the concept of the world to come, the new heavens and the new earth of Isaiah. So there are strong religious aspects in this cult.
And this dude, he claims that the Elohim extraterrestrials have been mistaken for gods, and that the Elohim created 40 Elohim / human hybrids that are prophets. And just like the other cults that I've covered, the Seekers cult, the Aetherius Society cult, and the Ashtar Command cult, he says that among the prophets are Buddha, Jesus, and Muhammad, and with this dude Rael himself being the 40th and final prophet. Right?
So all of this is related to Ezekiel chapter 1 and Merkavah mysticism. Merkavah means chariot. Ezekiel was able to view heaven and viewed a chariot in heaven, which is what these UFO craft represent. This is an old Mithraic, Platonic idea that the soul descended from God as an emanation and has to return to God by traveling across the 7 planets, which it initially emanated and descended across, and it has to reascend in order to have what is called an ecstatic reunion with God, which is also referred to as the unio mystica. In Christianity, the process is called Lectio Divina, whereby you meditate, gain gnosis, knowledge, and therefore you can escape the sublunar material world in which your body traps your soul. And these Heaven Gate UFO cults and similar cults all ascribe to very similar beliefs, which serve as a cover for this idea of the ecstatic reunion with God. It becomes an ecstatic reunion with the UFOs. You have to commit suicide in order for your soul to escape your body and then be taken over by the craft of the ETs, they claim. And this concept of becoming a prophet is very much a Kabbalistic concept of becoming a tzaddik, a righteous being, by ascending the Sephirotic tree in the reverse order that the emanations of light appeared from the Ein Sof through the Sephirotic tree. You go through the dark night of the soul. You use the gnosis of Deat, which is the 11th hidden Sephirah. You then cross over into the divine realm. And if you are completely righteous and absolutely perfect tzaddik, you then become a prophet. And God shows you the map of creation and the heavenly Torah, and you can then see the future and the past and everything all at once. And everything becomes simultaneous and clear, and you are a prophet. And the great prophets supposedly experienced this ascension and unio mystica, the ecstatic reunion with God, and became heavenly prophets. And another aspect of Merkava mysticism and this Kabbalistic ascension to God is the idea that Enoch ultimately became not only a prophet, but an angel. He became the angel Metatron. And then the prophet Elijah became the twin angel to Metatron, Sandalphon. So all of this concept of ascension, descension, emanation all relates directly to Kabbalah, Merkava, mysticism, and it also had its roots in Neoplatonism and Gnosticism and the Orphic mythologies, which all held that there was a divine spark in the body which came from Dionysus. The Titans slaughtered Dionysus and ate him, and that divine spark then got trapped in the material of their bodies, which were used to form man. So man has a dualistic aspect. He has the soul and spark of Dionysus and the body of material chaos of the Titans, and that spark has to be freed so that it can then rise through the heavens across the 7 planets to the divine realm and reunite with God in an ecstatic reunion with God.
They all claim to be, all of these cult leaders claim to be some sort of prophet, right? And they all talk about apocalyptic nature. But Nina, thanks so much for your $3 super sticker and your kind and generous support of the show, Nina. So this guy, again, Raelian, the Raelian cult, this guy Rael, believed that humanity is in the age of apocalypse, right? And threatens itself with nuclear war and annihilation, and that the Elohim will return to Earth to share their technology with humanity, right? And they, like I was mentioning earlier, they built this landing pad, right, for their spaceship, and their whole thing is like physical immortality. Is exactly like what you're talking about. Right?
Exactly.
They want to be physically immortal.
And
right?
I don't know about them, but some cults are androgynous. You pointed out to me one of them before the show, that they started to adopt androgynous dress and hairstyles and things like that. And I can't remember which one you said it was, but
That was the Heaven's Gate cult.
Oh, that was
and
Heaven's Gate.
Heaven's Gate cult in '76. They, after the media scrutiny and after the journalists infiltrated the Heaven's Gate cult, they started writing articles, and then it hit the media hardcore. And the Heaven's Gate cult was blamed for a lot of things. They were blamed for certain cattle mutilations, which I think is pretty interesting as well. They were blamed to be like Charlie Manson, and that they were all going to kill themselves. So they had to do the old switcheroo, just like the Ashtar Command cult did, that I was talking about in my UFO Doomsday Cult video, part 1. But the Heaven's Gate cult in '76, after the media came down on them and hit them hard, they decided to kind of retool their whole belief systems, because before 1976 they didn't give any of their followers any kind of direction. Like, they were just having their followers follow them around the country. They didn't give them any kind of direction. They were like, just wake up in the middle of the night, light a little fire, and then stare at the stars, look up in the sky, and hopefully you'll see a UFO, and the UFO will hopefully come and save you and take you to a different planet. That was literally what they said to their followers at that time. And then, and to take a tuning fork.
Coast to Coast and George Norrie or something involved in?
He was responsible for some of that, he said, because their whole thing at the before they killed themselves was this comet was coming by, and that there was a spacecraft on the tail end of the comet that was going to rapture them up from Earth. And George Norrie from Coast to Coast AM said that, oh yeah, I can see something behind that. That's behind that a meteor. And then that probably, I don't, definitely influenced
We're not
them.
blaming him.
Yeah.
That's the way that Heaven's Gate interpreted it, as an not an omen, but as an opportunity. They thought that they could then leave their bodies, their soul would escape their body and then enter that alien craft, and that they had prevented the earthquakes and other calamities that they anticipated would befall humanity. And when it didn't happen, they said that through their beliefs, they had saved humanity from it. And there are a lot of religious movements that operate that way, that if we can create a common egregore of our consciousness, we can change everything and create salvation and save the world by changing ourselves. That's very much a New Age belief system.
Yeah,
But
and
also they were very Gnostic in both those aspects of their soul leaving their body and entering a higher level. Again, this is getting away from the earth, which is satanic, especially the sublunar regions. Anything under the moon is the kingdom of the devil. And the gods, the Elohim, which means the gods, it's plural, live in the divine region, even beyond the stars. So the further you get away from that divine region and the closer you get to the earth, the more separated you are from God and the less godly you are. And ultimately, the center of the earth is hell, where everything is subdivided and absolutely separated from God. And that is the kingdom of the devil. So this concept of ETs is just a mirror of the idea of, at the highest level, you have the ineffable one, the monad, which has divine logos, divine intellect, and ideal forms. And the further away you get from that, as you go across the stars and towards the solar system and the planets, it becomes more and more separated from God, more and more divided and particular. And the God is one, it's perfect unity. As you get further and further from God, everything becomes more chaotic and more separated from God and from individuals. So you have at the top of this hierarchy, which is known as the Great Chain of Being by the Neoplatonists, you have at the top of that the greater gods. Below them, there are lesser gods, and there are several of those. The greater gods are divided into three. You have the one, you have the demiurge, and you have the world soul. And then beneath them, you have all of the lesser gods. And beneath the lesser gods, there are even more angels and demons, but they still occupy the heavenly realms. So they are closer to God. They have greater intellect than human beings. ETs are said to have greater intellect, and they do not have bodies trapped within material chaos. So they are made out of different elements from human beings. And this is something that the Talmud and Kabbalistic writings point out, is the idea that we are surrounded by demons, which we cannot see because they do not have material bodies made out of chaos. But if we had special eyes or virtual reality glasses, then we would be able to see all these demons swarming around us, and it would freak us out. So it's better that we are not able to see them. And they refer to this as the evil inclination, which they say surrounds humanity. The ET ufology movement is also dualistic. Some of them propose the idea that ETs are a danger and a threat to humanity, and that they are misanthropic and malevolent and will exterminate us. Others posit the notion that they are messianic and will provide the salvation to humanity. And the US government has now sided with the idea that the ETs are malevolent so that they can build space stations, up their expenditure for weapons production, change the budget, the national budget, so that they get more funding. And that may be a major element of all this. Wernher von Braun was said by hearsay to have predicted all of this. And another aspect is that humanity must unite as its own salvation against the ETs. This idea was forwarded by Professor of Philosophy at Columbia University, John Dewey, in 1917. Bill Cooper's done all the research on this. And it was also reported in Report from the Iron Mountain on the Possibility and Desirability of Peace by Leonard C. Lewin. in 1967. And Ronald Reagan also put forward this idea that if we can scare humanity with the idea that there is an enemy alien force, we can get humanity to unite behind defending humanity from these aliens and create a one world socialist government. And Bill Cooper hit that theme very hard. But he's a suspect figure. And we also have to wonder if naval intelligence is involved in all this UFO psyop, because in his book, Behold the Pale Horse, he tried to utilize the ufology mythology to create a scapegoat out of the UFOs and to create political leverage by claiming that certain politicians were being manipulated or working in collusion with ETs, and that what he called the Illuminati was working together with the ETs. So it became this scapegoat that no one could see, no one could identify.
Boogeyman.
And through the boogeyman, the Emmanuel Goldstein, that could be blamed for everything and take all the pressure off the real actors, the real criminals who are out to destroy humanity. And that's something we have to be very much on guard against, because they scapegoat various groups in that way, the Vatican, etc., to try to put a spotlight on something that's not real, that can't be identified, the Black Pope or whatever, and take the spotlight off the real criminals. And then they get those hordes of agents that they have in social media to attack anyone.
Constantly reinforcing the belief, yep.
Reinforcing the narrative and smearing and defaming and in a wolf pack way, viciously attacking anyone who tries to draw focus on the truth, both the truth that what they're saying is obvious, palpable nonsense, and that there are real actors whom we must focus on if we are to save ourselves from these pernicious attacks.
Really quick, Alex, thanks so much for your $10 super chat, brother. Really appreciate your kindness and generosity and support of the show. So you were mentioning earlier this hierarchy of beings. Well, this dude, George King from the Aetherist Society, which was a cult in 1954, received psychic communication from an extraterrestrial race that said that Krishna was from Saturn and that she was this hierarchical being, and that Jesus and Buddha were
Venus?
From Venus, yes.
Yeah. That again all goes along with the Talmud and Kabbalah, which ranks, and not just long before then, into the Chaldean and the mystery religions, the Orphic, Eleusinian, and Samothracian mystery religions. And this idea is also permeates Hinduism, that there are various planets with various gods on them. In Islam, the soul has to ascend. If it goes to heaven, it goes to one of the 7 planets. And these planets have colors. They correlate to the Zer on pin on the Sephirotic tree, the 7 lower Sephirot. And they serve different functions. There are 2 pillars, the pillar of mercy and the pillar of severity, and then the androgynous pillar of balance in the middle. In the middle of the pillar of severity, you have Mars, which is Gavura. Satan lives on Mars. It's the red planet. It's a planet of judgment and punishment. Satan, Samael, has a host of angels who execute this judgment. Others are spared this judgment by chesed, mercy, on the pillar of mercy, and they obtain the Lord's mercy by offering up scapegoats, which confuse Samael so that he punishes the wrong people for the sins of the wrongdoers. And this is part of this UFO distraction, is to obtain the mercy of the Lord and spare yourself the judgment of Gavura and Samael by scapegoating ETs for the crimes that real people are committing.
That is exactly what I've been trying to get across to people, that it's a distraction. It's a huge distraction, and everything that's been blamed on extraterrestrial involvement, we have been doing to ourselves. It's human beings that's been doing it, right?
And the only way to solve it is to address that.
Yep.
Otherwise, the criminals scapegoat somebody else, and remain invisible. And we have to shine a spotlight on them and show that this ET stuff is a delusion, an apparition, a phantasm to draw our attention away. It's waving hands and saying, look over there and not over here.
Exactly. So this George King guy from the Aetherius Society, he claimed to receive telepathic communication from a supposed extraterrestrial race telling him to prepare yourself. You're to become the voice of a interplanetary parliament, right? Now, if that's not wacky already, a week after he received that telepathic communication from this extraterrestrial race, that he was to be Earth's ambassador. Again, it's another prophet type thing. He's boosting himself up on a certain level above other regular people.
And there were biblical anticipants to this. Daniel and Joseph were interpreters of the great ruler's dreams, and they were able to manipulate the leaders of the great empires by saying that they could interpret their dreams. And there is also this idea of the logos, Platonic idea, as being the intermediary between the gods and the earth. And these people want to become that type of intermediary. Christ was one of those intermediary figures. Adam of Light before Christianity was one of those intermediaries. And the great Middle Platonic philosopher from Alexandria, Philo, said that the logos would serve as the intermediary between the gods and humanity.
So a week after he received this psychic telepathic communication that he was to be Earth's ambassador, this George King guy, he claimed that a world famous Swami, right, broke into his locked apartment, right, and instructed George King to form a group, right, dedicated to helping the planet. And the Swami then taught him yoga, prayer, and meditation over a long period of time. The Swami just posted up in his apartment somehow mysteriously. And this teaching from this unnamed, unknown, world famous Swami enabled him to receive telepathic messages from Venus. Right?
It hints so very strongly of intelligence agencies who always try to create a legend so that people get sucked into this idea of the legend. And all the clairvoyance and telepathy con artists of the late 1800s and early 20th centuries would also have these kinds of legends that they would use to suck people in.
And then he creates...
It's a con. It's an obvious con.
Absolutely, it's definitely a con. I mean, it's the only way that it can be described, especially with all the failed predictions and apocalyptic notions of death is imminent, the world's going to be destroyed next week. That doesn't happen, and then they switch the date, they push the date back further, and then that never happens. But this dude, George King, is really responsible for a lot of the New Age type of movement that's going around, right? He claimed that these beings, Jesus and Muhammad and Krishna,
the ascended masters of theosophy.
Yes, exactly, and that they're on another dimension or plane, and that the concept that these beings exist on some sort of spiritual level, right, by having a higher vibratory rate, which can also be lowered and higher depending on what you're doing. And that was basically this dude's King's explanation of the reported blinking in and out of UFOs and supposed extraterrestrial contacts, right? And people just regurgitate this information without having any idea where it comes from. I mean, all of the New Age communities, everybody on the internet talks about raising your vibration to a higher vibratory rate. They're talking about the ascension of the planet, that the Earth needs to reach a certain frequency in order for it to bifurcate from the old Earth into a new Earth, and then that new Earth will be a new age, a golden age of humanity, and everyone will be happy and peace will be there.
That's all Kabbalistic the earth is the Sephirah Malchut, which is Shekhinah. She was separated. She's the female aspect of the Godhead. She was separated from Yahweh, which is Tiferet. And Yesod, which is a phallic image of Yahweh, is to elevate Malchut up to Tiferet so that the earth ascends to heaven and that there is a reunion of the Godhead into an androgynous form. The earthly temple will match the heavenly temple. The temple has the bedchamber in which Yahweh and Shekhinah love one another and will reunite in their androgynous form. So all of this is simply cover for convincing people to accept the mythology of Kabbalah and to act as servants of this agenda. These are not prophecies, these are plans to bring about all of this. And what they are going to do is dupe people, as they did through Gnosticism and early Christianity, into becoming suicidal with the idea that the only way that they can ascend in this fashion is to voluntarily kill themselves off. And then their soul will be freed from this evil, corrupt kingdom of Malchut, of chaos and the material world, and will then ascend to an ecstatic reunion with God. So it is one massive suicide cult that they are trying to impose on humanity. All of the Abrahamic faiths worked towards that goal of this idea of creating the world to come, Olam Haba, by destroying the present world, Olam Hazeh, which was to last for 3 zodiacal ages, each one 2,000 years, so that it created the 6,000 years of the 6 days of creation. During that period, through the process of Tikkun Olam, the divine sparks are sifted away from the calipotic shells, and their shining darkness, their essence of the nighttime luminaries will outshine the sun will disappear, and the moon and the black sun will triumph. And there will be a whole new world, and that is why it's called New Age, because it is this 4th zodiacal age, the age of Aquarius, which comes out of the age of Pisces. Pisces represents Christ as a fish, as the great Leviathan. Before Pisces was Aries, which is the ram's horn of the shofar. When the shofar blows, it makes the sound yow, which is a donkey braying, which relates to the god Seth. The god Seth hates the god Ra of the sun. Seth is the god of chaos and darkness, the black sun. They want the black sun to illuminate and the regular sun to disappear. And before that was the age of Taurus, which is the golden calf of the son of Hathor. The solar disk of Hathor, his mother, sits between his horns. The golden calf was destroyed to honor Seth, the god of darkness and chaos. And ultimately, in the world to come, they believe that the earth is flat, and the earth above that is the world of the sun. The earth below that is the world of the black sun. The world above is the god Ra. The world below is the black sun of Seth, and that those poles will reverse as the magnetic poles of the earth are about to do. And then the blackness will be on top and the darkness will shine. And that is what this concept of ascension actually means, because they say as above, so below, that these two worlds are opposite of one another, that there is the Sitra Achra and there is the Sitra Yemina, the right-hand side, and the other side, which is the left-hand side, and they are 2 opposing worlds that sit on top of each other, and they have to reverse. And the calipotic tree, which is below the Sephirotic tree, has to reverse and become on top, and the nighttime luminaries have to rule the universe as the daytime luminary of Ra is destroyed.
It's really interesting, the concept of Ra, because Rael, that dude that runs this Raelianism cult, this guy that I showed earlier, it's just Ra, which is Amun Ra, and El, which is Elohim. He just created 2 different gods.
You can add Isis to it and get Israel. Yes.
Which is crazy because this.
And the point is to point out that this is all a cover for religious mythology. Freemasonry is the same way. It's occultist and Kabbalistic. Gnosticism was the same type of idea of the oral traditions being revealed that were concealed in the written traditions of the Torah and Tanakh. And what it is doing is try to get rid of all forms of paganism to supplant them with the religion that these people want to impose on what they call the Sitra Achra, the other side. They created Christianity and Islam as religions of the other side, and ufology is simply a natural progression through occultism and socialism and Marxism into creating this new age religion of the other side, so that they dupe the other side into adopting all of these mythologies as a universal suicide cult in which humanity embraces the idea that it has to be elevated out of the material world and free its soul from the corpse and prison, the material body, and escape this material world, so that all these faiths welcome the idea of being raptured and being mass executed. They will be like the Christians in the arena, in the Colosseum, waving their hands and cheering on the idea that the lions are about to rip them apart, because they will believe that that is their salvation. And that's what all this rapture mythology is about, is duping the other side, the Sitra Achra, into accepting the idea that they are inherently evil, that sex is evil, that procreation is evil, that childbirth is painful, and childbirth has to be replaced with cloning and with creating homunculi in laboratories, and that when that is done, humanity will then reform to the original form of Adam as an androgyne before he was cut into Adam and Eve, and will be immortal. The curse that was placed on Adam and Eve for consuming knowledge, the gnosis, which would make them into gods, was that they would die. And the other curse was that they would have to give children in order to keep humanity going. And then a further curse was that they would have to labor for their food, whereas in the Garden of Eden, all food was provided naturally for them. So they have the mythology that knowledge, the tree of knowledge, will eventually ripen, and technology will undo all of those curses, so that men and women will no longer have sex with each other, which is what the knowledge is all about, that they are male and female opposites. They will become a polarity in one being that is immortal and androgynous, and therefore women will not have to suffer the pain of childbirth. Instead, it will be conducted through the ripened knowledge of technology that now enables humanity to create human beings in laboratories. And the curse
Human
of death will
2.0.
be, yes, and they're manufacturing beef in laboratories as well. So the curse of having to labor for food will be supplanted by robotics. The curse of death will be supplanted by immortality. And the curse of women having childbirth and men and women being at war with one another, which is one of the terrible things that the Greeks instilled into the mythology that was adopted by the Kabbalists, is that women are inherently evil and tempt men to sin and are always at war with men, and that a more natural and beautiful state is to be androgynous. And the goal of the Kabbalists is to manufacture these human beings completely out of male DNA and get rid of the evil inclination of the other side, which is said to be female and material and darkness, and supplant it with pure male DNA by making the egg cells out of the skin cells of males. And they have that technology now.
That's exactly what this dude, Rael, believes. He believes that immortality is achieved through cloning. So they can clone someone, transfer their consciousness into it, and another really into a clone so that they can live forever. So,
and the religious aspect of that is it was undoing the curse that was put onto Adam. Adam and Eve ate from the tree before the fruit was ripe. Now the 6,000 years, the 6 days of creation have passed, and the fruit is now ripe. So Rael and the others can now consume it. It has become safe to eat. and it provides the knowledge which will enable man to undo the curses of death, childbirth, and being a specific gender as opposed to being androgynous.
Nina was asking earlier in the chat what happened to the Raelianism cult. Well, they're still around. The guy's still alive. It's
Yep.
still a cult that's going on right now. But something interesting that I want to touch on, but not go into, is that the Eve clone that was supposedly came out of this clonade facility in Canada. I was trying to look up pictures of her to find, pictures of the baby and figure out where she is now and what she looks like now. Couldn't find any pictures at all. Very difficult to find. But I'm going to break down this cult more later on, because there's so much more to get into with this cult. It'll be probably this week sometime. But I did find an article, and you're going to love this, Christopher, that Eve, as of 2018, is in Israel.
Oh, really?
So I wanted to talk a little bit more about the Heaven's Gate cult, because I think I kind of skipped over that thing when we were talking about it earlier. So in 1976, whenever after the media blitz came after them, and they basically lost a lot of followers, they decided to make.
Wasn't that also when their prophecy of the earthquakes and things had failed, and that they were under a lot of pressure, a lot of people, and they were being studied by that psychologist who coined the term cognitive dissonance, as you pointed out in one of your previous videos?
Well, that was in the Seekers cult. That was this cult here.
So that was different from Heaven's Gate.
Yeah, Heaven's Gate is a different cult. It was that cognitive dissonance was created by this psychologist that infiltrated the cult and created the term cognitive dissonance for all of their failed predictions, because when they claimed that a tidal wave was going to come and destroy the Earth, followed by an earthquake that triggers a tidal wave, and that these extraterrestrial ships were going to come pick them up to save them from the Earth being destroyed in December 21st of 1945. And then
that mirrors exactly Plato's description of Atlantis. When they obtained the technology which threatened the gods sent earthquakes and tidal waves to destroy Atlantis and submerge it.
And after that prediction failed, they pushed it to Christmas Eve. And then after it didn't happen on Christmas Eve, they told their followers, after a lot of them had left, that they had done enough, that they were such great human beings and such great occultists that they avoided natural disaster, and the United States was no longer going to be destroyed, and that the ships didn't have to come anymore.
Isn't that also part of Raelian mythology, that if people adopt their beliefs as a messianic belief, it will be salvation for humanity?
I believe so. I believe that is something that, see, a lot of these cults, they first start out as that these things are physical, right? That they're physical UFOs, that they're physical extraterrestrials. And then after all of their predictions no longer work out, they switch it to a spiritual, new age type of thing. Like this, that's what the Heaven's Gate cult was all about. That started in 1970. There's many videos of T and Do talking about how these things are physical, that these UFOs are physical. There's going to be a physical ascension, that they're going to come down in physical craft and save them, or that they're going to be raptured up into a physical craft. And then later on, after this media blitz happens, and then they start doing, and their predictions failed, they decided to switch it up, and they created 14 rules in order to be a part of the cult. 14 guidelines that you had to go by, and if you didn't prescribe to these guidelines, then you were no longer in the cult. You were kicked out of the cult. Right. So, and one of these things that talks about the next level, or the new level, right? And T and Do talked about how they could literally physically transform into an extraterrestrial being in the next level.
That The clairvoyants and transcendentalists of the 19th century, from 1870s, I guess, onwards, were forwarding this idea that there was a possibility of a fourth dimension, and that things could go into that fourth dimension and tie and untie knots that couldn't be, that would be apparently stationary in the 3 dimensions of space, but they could do it in the 4th dimension. And Charles Howard Hinton created the idea of the tesseract from the ancient Christians' tessera, which was a little black cube that was used as a passkey to get in and out of their secret meetings. And he said that as the square is to the cube in the 4th dimension, there is a higher dimensional cube, which is called a tesseract. And there was a great philosopher who came over from Germany in the revolutions of 1848 named J.B. Stallo. And he became a judge in the United States. And he strongly opposed this mythology of hyperdimensions, of higher dimensions, of the 4th dimension, 5th dimension, of Riemann and what were called transcendental geometers. These geometers created the idea that the mind could transcend into the 4th dimension, and that would explain what's called remote viewing now, which is clairvoyance. But Stallo was pretty bright, and he said that this is all nonsense, that the 3 axes, which form 3-dimensional space, are all perpendicular to each other. And if you try to introduce a 4th axis, it can never be perpendicular to those 3 real axes of space. So what they are doing is creating an abstract fiction by way of analogy to the actual 3 axes of measurable space, and that this 4th axis is completely a mental fiction that has no reality whatsoever, and they are utilizing it to create fictional movements which cannot be represented in 3-dimensional space. And all of this string theory and hyperdimensional theory is intellectual garbage. It has no reality whatsoever. We cannot conduct experiments in higher dimensions because they only exist as mental abstractions constructed out of words by way of an analogy to real laboratories which exist in 3-dimensional space. And this has enabled both physicists, ufologists, and other myth makers to create all kinds of stupid mythologies to represent ancient religious beliefs of the Big Bang, which is based on Orphic mythology of the cosmic egg, expressly designed on that mythology. All of these hyperdimensional lies that people are telling themselves and trying to convince modern man of are demonstrably false. They are metaphysical, not scientific. They cannot be falsified, and no experiments can be conducted as laboratories within higher dimensions because higher dimensions don't exist. And it provides a good cover for these ufologists to create a theory that can explain anything and therefore explains nothing by saying that these events are taking place in the higher dimensions, which can never be perceived and which don't exist. So they have a perfect cover. They can explain away any mythology that they propose and explain away any lie by introducing this concept of higher dimensions. And physicists have done the exact same thing.
Yeah, and this dude, George King from the A Theorist Society, this is a picture of their location now in California. He taught the belief in reincarnation based on the law of karma, right? Which
again, that's pure Pythagoreanism, pure Platonism, and Kabbalah has adopted it as the concept of the Gilgul. And they believe that those who are punished are actually fortunate because they will die and then they will be reincarnated in a more pure form. And that the present world, in a way, this idea of the present world and the world to come, Olam Hazeh and Olam Haba, is a reincarnation of the world. the world becomes purified. The darkness, which is actually sunlight, is removed. And then the darkness of chaos, the nighttime luminaries, replaces them, and the light is purified, the darkness shines, and the daylight has been sifted out and removed because it becomes a husk. It's the light that blinds. And this was established very firmly in the 10 plagues of Egypt, where the locusts blotted out the sky to create darkness. There were 3 days of darkness during which the Egyptians could not see, but the Israelites could see, because the Israelites are moon worshippers who worship Seth, and they can see in this shining darkness of the nighttime luminaries. But the Egyptians and non-Israelites are killed off by it. And then we had the plague of the firstborn, which took place at midnight, which is the exact opposite when Ra is furthest away from being visible in the sky. So all the plagues that were imposed upon, well, not all of them, but they relate to this idea of darkness, of getting rid of those who worship Ra, and getting rid of Ra, the sun, and supplanting it with those, the chosen people of Seth, the god of darkness and chaos, who kill off the firstborn, the children of sunlight, and then take their place.
Yes, that is exactly pretty much what George King believes. He believes that, reincarnation, that everyone is basically a master and a god, and then you keep coming back based on your karma and what you did in this life, and continue evolving life after life. And his society also claims that evolution also includes the earth as well, that the earth is like a living entity and is vibrating on a much higher state of evolution than what humans are, and that the earth is going to go through this metamorphosis as well, which was what I was talking about with these new age beliefs, and these people talking about this bifurcation of earth, that the earth is going to ascend, and the people that are on a certain frequency level can ascend with it and go to a 5D. You know what I mean? It's the 5D concept of that there's these different dimensions that we can physically go to, and that the earth is a part of that. And whenever the earth ascends, it reaches that vibratory status, then the people that are also matching with earth's vibratory status also goes with that earth into a new earth, this 5D earth.
There's a very dangerous aspect to that. Before, I guess it was King came up with that concept, Gustave Le Bon, at the turn of the century, from the 19th to the 20th century, said that the universe evolves. And as evidence of that, he provided the existence of radioactive decay. And he said that all matter will eventually decay, and there will have to be a rebirth of the universe. And it's part of this cosmic cycle. And he wanted to age the evolution of the planets and the worlds, and how this creation of matter and then its radioactive decay came about. And it's interesting that he predicted in 1903 that if this decay could be accelerated, we could create nuclear bombs. And he said that the person who discovers how to do this won't be able to tell anyone about it, because his laboratory and his entire city will be obliterated by the bomb that he will create if he figures out how to accelerate radioactive decay. And then that was discovered by Otto Hahn and picked up on by Lisa Meitner, and then Leo Szilard and Enrico Fermi developed the nuclear chain reaction of fission, which produced fission atomic bombs. And then they discovered the idea that fusion would be even more powerful, so that they could, Edward Teller and others worked on this, that they could develop thermonuclear hydrogen bombs, which incorporated an initial fission reaction that would then create the conditions to, like the center of the sun, for these fusion reactions. So this concept of evolving the earth could, in the minds of some people, I'm not going to accuse anyone specifically, of being a willful and wanton, reckless desire to destroy the entire earth, either through fission reactions or fusion reactions. And when Oppenheimer and Teller created both atomic bombs and then thermonuclear weapons, the scientists were deeply concerned that any of those reactions could potentially create a chain reaction which would consume the entire earth. And it is dangerous that at CERN and other atom smashing particle bombarders and accelerators, there is the potential that at some point we are going to generate some kind of reaction which will speed up the decay of all matter on the earth and completely obliterate us. And that may be the objective of some of these people. So I'm throwing this out as a warning to humanity that it is a demonstrable fact that when they instigated the first explosion of an atomic bomb and then the first explosion of the hydrogen bomb, there were people warning that there was a potential that that could consume the whole earth. And we should be aware of the idea that at some point they may be able to generate reactions which will consume the whole earth. And that may be the objective of some people.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the name of this cult that predicted the end of the world because they were getting ready to detonate the H-bomb. On the day this UFO cult predicted that it was going to destroy the entire world, which was the detonation of the H-bomb, and then it didn't happen. But I can't. It was in one of these studies. But I'd have to go back and research it again.
I read about that too, and that was one of the things that triggered me to gain this insight that this is all part of this idea of what they view as the ascension of the earth. By destroying its material nature, they believe they're destroying the material world of chaos. Just as by committing suicide, these people kill the corpse of flesh, so that their soul can ascend, which is what the Gnostics pursued. They wouldn't have children because they thought it was evil to trap a soul, the spark of divinity, within the corpse of a material body in the prison of material flesh. And they may want to do that to the entire earth and destroy this material world, which is the kingdom of Satan. The New Testament says in several places that the earth is the kingdom of Satan. And another interesting aspect to this is that Wernher von Braun postulated and proposed the idea of creating satellite platforms for launching nuclear weapons. And we heard Trump talking about Space Force, and he also, well, not he, but I think it was Arthur Rudolph, or maybe it was Wernher von Braun, and other scientists from Operation Paperclip proposed the idea that there could be beam weapons that could also take out other satellites and be utilized as part of Space Force. And I think that all of this escalation is heading towards this concept of one, defending us from ultimate destruction, when the real plan is to utilize these as platforms for implementing ultimate destruction.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That is definitely a thing. There's this Air Force operation that was called Operation Looking Glass that happened in 1961. It was either 1961 or 62, but it was basically an operation to militarize space, to put a nuclear command post in space with the ability to launch rockets from space, like nukes from space.
And if the escalation occurs, we have to provide a credible deterrence, but it would be much better and much safer to not go there. But we're entering into dangerous territory because the Chinese and Russians have developed very advanced hypersonic weapons, and we're going to be forced to create a mutually assured destruction system run by AI which can respond instantaneously to anything that AI perceives as a threat. And we're entering into an era where AI will have the potential ability to exterminate vast portions of humanity. If we re-up the number of nuclear weapons to what they were and create even more powerful nuclear weapons, they're going to have the ability to wipe out all of humanity in the future.
Which is interesting because that's what the Ashtar Command cult talked about. They said that, which it was just a cover up for all of their failed predictions of Ashtar Command people, ships coming to save them during a natural disaster. They then later claimed that the extraterrestrials are no longer going to interfere on the earth unless there's a huge natural disaster or nuclear war, which is exactly where that whole prime directive notion comes from, when these disclosurists are talking, whenever they get questioned about where are the aliens, right? Where are the extraterrestrials? If the universe is so populated with extraterrestrial life forms, then where are they?
And the
Why can't we
excuse
see
they
them?
give is the excuse that is derived from the Talmud and Kabbalah, that we don't have the eyes, the glasses to perceive them because they exist in other dimensions and they are not composed of all the elements that human beings are composed of, and therefore they are invisible to us. This is very much a Christian idea. The early Docetists said that Jesus arrived as spirit and an apparition, and that the appearance of his body was an illusion. And Jesus ascended and descended in the harrowing of hell. And all of these concepts are taken directly from these religious mythologies. And they also have Jesus returned, and he couldn't, the people didn't recognize him, and he had to inform them of who he was. And a lot of these alien conceptions mirror that they can take on human form or animal form. This related to Zeus, who would appear as an animal, because if the women that he wanted to seduce saw his real form, they would be destroyed and killed. So he would appear as a bull or a swan or whatever it was.
This guy, George King, once again, his society, the Aetherius Society cult, predicts the coming of the next master, right? From space.
The second coming of Christ.
Yes.
There were cults that specifically said that this would be the second coming of Christ. And there were also people who warned about it. The French Canadian with that Project Bluebeam, he said that they would fake second coming of Christ. And I think Bill Cooper was warning about similar ideas. And the Kabbalistic notion is that the Christ returns as the Antichrist to bring about the destruction of humanity. And that was written down in the Gospel of Judas, that the apostles were actually deceivers of people, and that the goal was for Christ to ultimately exterminate all of them. And that was also foretold in the Apocalypse of Abraham, which was contemporary to the Gospel of Mark, the very first of the canonical Christian writings. So that has been the plan all along. And that is why even in Orthodox Christianity, they present the Antichrist as if an imposter of Christ, but he's not an imposter. He actually is the Christ. And the whole design of the Christ is to destroy the present world. He is Pisces. He is the fish of the Leviathan, and he will destroy humanity. And one of the ways he's going to destroy humanity is, as happened with the Gnostics, by convincing people that they have a divine spark that has to be freed from the body, and therefore the body has to be killed in order for the soul to ascend to the heavenly kingdom. And that's what Revelations is all about. And that's what the tribulation is all about. And that's what the mythology of the rapture is all about, is that the Christ is going to emanate, to descend, as an ET or in whatever form the New Ages can convince people of. And he will then reap mass destruction of the earth and humanity and dupe humanity into believing that their only salvation is death and that life is in fact the prison and therefore death is real life. It's complete cognitive dissonance. It's believing the idea that death is life and extermination is salvation. And that's been the Christian concept from the beginning.
Well, George King didn't speak about that doomsday Jesus. He talked about space Jesus, right? That Jesus was going to, this ascended master was going to arrive in a spacecraft, right, with a great power and present an ultimatum to the leaders of Earth, right? And
the day the earth stood still.
Exactly. It's exactly what it is. And those who engage in war or ignore the new things that this new master is saying, this divine law, will be removed from the earth and reborn upon some other planet. Right?
And how do people become peaceful beings when the nature of humanity, according to the religions, is evil, that we are conceived in original sin? That is done by stripping us of our will and our minds, by implanting silicon, inorganic materials into our brains to make us programmable from a central singularity in which we ourselves will become robots programmed by other robots, and we will lose our will, and ultimately we will all be exterminated. The only way ultimately to have peace is to get rid of the human beings who create war.
Yes, unfortunately, yes.
So they always cloak their ambitions to get rid of us in the idea that they're going to save us by subjugating us to a certain power and a certain set of beliefs, and that we all have to become egalitarians in this new ecumenical new age religion and accept it, and they will sick the wolves on us if we don't. So we have to accept this mythology or perish. Once we accept this mythology, it creates the preconditions in which all of humanity can be exterminated. So in the name of saving us and providing us with immortality and androgyny, they are setting us up to lead us into the slaughterhouse where they'll be able to get rid of all of us.
Have you ever noticed too that a lot of the depictions of the extraterrestrials look very androgynous?
Androgynous and angelic, or demonic, one or the other. And the flying saucer serves as a halo. And they are often illuminated as if they are themselves luminescent.
Yep, and this dude, George Van Tassel, right? He created this cult named the Ashtar Command, right? Which sometimes is referred to Ashtar Shiran, and started with this guy,
And
George
he
Van
built
Tassel.
that structure. I forget what it was called, but that's a model of it, a
Yeah.
scale model.
Here's the structure that he built. It's right in behind him. And,
Temples are very important to all of these people.
And he apparently received psychic communication from this being known as Ashtar, and Ashtar told him to build this facility, and then he then later on developed his psychic abilities to such a degree that he could not only communicate with extraterrestrial races but also communicate with deceased humans. And he
And none of that
communicated.
requires any proof. It's just like the prophets who say that God has spoken to them, or people who say that things are spoken to them in dreams. Nobody else can hear it. Nobody else can see it. It requires no proof, and it's based on faith. And if they build up a cult around themselves, they then have enforcers who can attack other people who fail to believe in it. And ultimately, they develop into world religions where Christians go around burning people who refuse to accept the mythologies, which can never be heard or seen, and the God can never be seen. But if you don't accept the written words of the prophets, you get burned at the stake. You're a heretic. You're a blasphemer. You're evil. You believe in witches, and you're practicing witchcraft.
And this dude, George Van Tassel, right? He got his psychic powers so well developed that he was able to telepathically communicate with Nikola Tesla.
Yeah.
Right? And
Tesla gave him these technologies, right?
Yeah.
Wasn't that part of what he said?
That Nikola Tesla apparently got from communicating with extraterrestrials, right? That's where this whole thing comes from, and this concept that Nikola Tesla was that he wasn't a human, that he was an actual extraterrestrial that got trapped here, and that's how he was able to create all these technologies. But Nikola Tesla didn't
touch on that point, because there's an important aspect of that.
Yeah.
They demean humanity in that way. They say that Jesus himself was a demigod that was born from, according to the Kabbalists, he was born from Lilith mating with Eve. According to the Christians, he was born from the Holy Spirit mating with Eve. But it's this idea that humanity requires a higher level of intelligence, which is closer to the divine. And the ancients perceived that very much as being angels and demons coming from this divine realm of the heavenly spheres, the seven heavenly spheres of the seven planets. And as if human beings can't take credit for any of our genius. It all has to be a higher, closer to God, closer to the divine intellect in order to create these higher forms. And Plato very much demeaned the human intellect and said that human beings exist in a cave, and we see the non-ideal forms of shadows, and our intellect is incapable of perceiving anything divine or of creating any divine forms. And we therefore have to escape our bodies in order to reunite with God, in order to perceive the divine and the ideal form. And therefore humans get relegated to this animal level of stupidity and of having inferior minds and the inferior intellect to angels and demons, or ETs as they're now called. And therefore these ETs are superior to us. And these blended races of the fallen angels, the Nephilim, are bigger than us and more intellectually superior. And therefore it is their divine right to subjugate us. And this was also incorporated into the idea of the royalty. Initially, the royalty, the blue bloods, were said to represent this hierarchical structure, and they were a reflection of the Elohim, the king and queen of heaven, and the divine, immortal, androgynous son of the king and queen of heaven had this divine right to rule over other humanity, all the rest of humanity. And they are creating a race of divine people. And that may be one of the ambitions of these UFO cults, is to present their members as this blended demigod race of ET humanity that therefore is closer to God because it came from the heavens, which are closer to God, than humanity, which came from the earth and the soil of Satan. And therefore they have not only the right, but the duty to rule over us. And we have no right to object. We have no right to question, because our minds are intellectually inferior and closer to the chaos of Satan, whereas they are closer to the divine intellect of God. And therefore, since they are told by God these divine thoughts, they can therefore insist that we accept what they say based on faith and not based on an empirical evidence and reason.
So this guy, George Van Tassel, he, after communicating with Nikola Tesla via psychic communication, right? Nikola Tesla gave him schematics, not to build a free energy device that's going to be helpful for all of humanity, right? That's too much, right? But what Nikola Tesla did was gave him the schematics and told him how to build a integration machine, right? And this integration machine would give people the ability for time travel, rejuvenation, living forever, immortality, just like the Raelianism cult,
Just like
anti-gravity.
Christianity, just like the Egyptian religions of the afterlife, it all comes out of Egypt and mummifying people. And in a sense, with these cyborg organisms and trying to make us into immortal beings, what they're doing is cutting out our hearts and our brains and turning us into mummies that supposedly have this afterlife that the Egyptians were after.
It's like each one of these cults, as you study them,
and if they conceive of life as so horrible, why are they after this afterlife? It's kind of paradoxical.
It is. They think that and that's been the problem, is that people think that it sucks so bad here that they are not able to actually live their life here to the fullest extent and actually dig their toes down into it. Because I personally think that it's all about the experience. That's what life is here, is just to experience life.
Well, maybe it wouldn't be so horrible if we dropped all of these mythologies which portray us as if we are conceived in original sin and our chaos, and that our bodies are our enemies, and that the only way we can save ourselves is to escape this planet of material chaos and the corpse of our flesh, and by dying. Maybe if we dropped all of that mythology, which is imprinted and burned into the brains of human beings from the time they're born, and if we stop worshiping such morbid images as a crucified man on a cross, we can escape this self-degradation, that we have a poor intellect that can never conceive of anything divine, and that the divine is ineffable and beyond our ability to understand, and that we have to look to these prophets to tell us how to think and what to do, instead of looking to reason and empirical observations.
And we need an intermediary always.
Always.
Always
A Messiah. We need a Messiah to save us. And the Savior figure is the one who saves us by exterminating us. And it's often a foreign Savior. They portray Vladimir Putin, who wants to destroy the West, as if he's the salvation of the West, because the West is so evil and corrupt, it needs to be saved through destruction. They play the same game over and over again, and it's the game of Christianity, that this Middle Eastern foreign man would save Europe by exterminating people, and that life is evil, and therefore to be good is to cease to exist. And that's what the Cathars, the Bogomils, and all the Gnostics preached to European peoples. It was a Trojan horse and a trap to exterminate the peoples of Europe.
Well, this Rael guy from the Raelian cult, UFO cult, says that the Elohim told him that they were responsible for all of the world's religions and mythology.
Well, why is it that anyone would believe that? When all the religions were created by human beings? Why didn't giraffes create any religions? Why weren't their minds elevated to the point where they could create religions?
Yeah, all these cults, they just up the ante on everything. They double down.
Nothing they say requires any proof. Therefore, it can prove anything and proves nothing as a result.
Yep. Van Tassel, also claimed that Jesus was a being from space, just like George King from the Atheist Society did later on, and just like Heaven's Gate cult, T and Do did after that. But T and Do upped the ante on the whole Jesus is from space. They actually believed that they were a reincarnation of Jesus and Mother Mary, and that their followers were all reincarnated versions of their disciples.
Well, this is incorporated in the Platonic concept of the world soul, that the one emanates the demiurge, which is androgynous, And then the demiurge splits into its male half, the creator God, and its female half, the world soul. And the world soul contains within it all the souls that are to be born of humanity, plants, and animals. And this becomes the Guff and Adam Kadmon and the messianic figure of Kabbalah, and Adam himself, who contained within himself all of the 600,000 souls of a chosen people. And that those 600,000 souls could then be divided into parts. And that's the reason why there are more than 600,000 now, and they can be an admixture. You can get a mixture of these 600,000 souls divided and divided. There's also the concept that each one of these souls was originally androgynous in Adam and got separated into male and female aspects when Adam and Eve were cut in half and separated. And that is why we go in search of our soulmate to marry. And if we marry that soul, which was originally one soul, an androgynous soul within Adam that got separated into Adam and Eve, we will then have a happy marriage. If we are unfortunate, we will wed the soul of someone else's half soul that got divided that way. And they also have the mythology that these are twin souls, that they have a mirror in heaven.
Twin flames, bro.
Yeah, that is mirrored on earth. This was all a plagiarized theory that was taken from Plato's Symposium, where he said that there were originally androgynous beings that had 4 hands and 4 feet and 2 heads, one male and one female, and that they could tumble, and they threatened to chase after the gods and kill them because they could tumble so fast with these 4 hands and 4 feet, that the gods then cut them in half and separated them, and that men and women marry so that they could then find that original half that was cut in half and separated. They also said that there were some types who were 2 males put together, and those became homosexual people, and that there were 2 that were female, and that those became lesbians. And that is why they have the desire to pursue people of the same gender, and that is why heterosexual people have the desire to pursue people of the opposite gender.
That's very interesting. I knew about the androgynous nature of Adam, and then he was, split into Eve, and that was the great separation. And humanity has kind of been striving to find that other part of them, and that's where the whole soulmate thing comes from, and this new age concept that everyone was throwing around for years and years and years, which is the twin flame concept, that you got to find your twin flame to be happy, and you got to make sure it's the right twin flame, and you'll be able to recognize it from whenever you meet them, because sparks are just going to fly. And then that got people being like, oh well, if I can't find my twin flame, then it's just going to be a horrible existence here. If I can't find the person that I'm meant to be with, then it's just going to suck.
Yep.
So
well, that's all directly derived from Plato through Kabbalistic beliefs. But that's also as above, so below. That's mirrored in heaven by the idea that Yahweh and Shekinah are twin flames, and that they need to be reunited. And it was a great catastrophe that when they were separated, and that the means to reunite them is to build the temple, because the temple carries the bedchamber, and that when their chosen people unite and enjoy one another in their bedchambers, that encourages Yahweh and Shekinah to also reunite, and arouses Yesod, which is the Sephirah between Tiferet and Malchut, and then Yahweh pursues Shekinah. And that in this great calamity of separation, Satan was also divided into its male and female aspects. And Yahweh is now enjoying himself with the female aspect of Satan, Lilith, and Shekinah is enjoying herself with the male aspect of Satan, which is Samael, who also happens to be Jesus Christ, the Messiah, son of Joseph. So Shekinah is now spending time with Jesus, the Leviathan serpent, instead of Yahweh, and that is what causes the calamities of the earth, and that has to be broken, and then Shekinah has to return to Yahweh, and Yahweh is sleeping with Lilith, and that has to end, and he has to again sleep with Shekinah, and then presumably the devil will also be reunited, and Samael and Lilith will become wed.
Come on, Christopher. Don't you believe in George Van Tassel here? Come on, dude. This George Van Tassel guy is communicating with Nikola Tesla. Tesla is downloading schematics and drawings on how to build a time machine right into Van Tassel's head. Come
I
on,
believe
man.
what can be physically observed and is rational and can be repeated in experiments. And then I only believe that that is the best that we can achieve at any one given time, and that at any given time, a new experiment can arise, which will shatter the delusion of what it was that we believed at prior times.
So just to wrap up this Ashtar Command cult, there was this guy named Robert Short that was producing George Van Tassel's content. He was pushing it out into his magazine called Interplanetary News Digest. This is one of the magazines right here. And then old Van Tassel here gets really upset with Robert Short because other people are channeling Ashtar, and George Van Tassel says that Ashtar's the other people that are channeling Ashtar and communicating with Ashtar are fake and frauds. Right? This guy is the only one that can communicate with Ashtar. He's the only one that has the true message of the Ashtar Command.
So everyone has to subordinate themselves to him. No one can refute what he says on any level, because to do so is blasphemous, because he has been given divine knowledge and is the wellspring, the source of divine truth. And no one can question him. Anyone that questions him is committing evil, and therefore the mob of the cult must attack that individual and destroy them and prevent them from being heard.
Exactly. So this Robert Short dude broke away from Van Tassel and began his own cult called the Ashtar Command. And this is
It's just like the mafia or any dictatorship. You get these groups that break off, and somebody else wants to be the leader, and they get their hitmen to wipe out whoever is the leader,
so that they can become the head of the organization, just like the Association of Davidian Seventh-day Adventists, right? Where this lady named Florence claimed herself to be a prophet, convinced her followers that an apocalypse would occur in 1959, and they gathered hundreds of their followers at Mount Carmel near Waco, Texas, for the fulfillment of this doomsday apocalyptic end of the world scenario that she prophesied, right? And of course, that didn't happen. The end of the world did not happen in 1959. So everyone feeling super let down about this failed prediction. Benjamin Roden, which was part of this group, saw opportunity, right? Just like Robert Short saw opportunity with Van Tassel, right? Like any good cult following does, he just formed a different group. And what Benjamin Roden did, he just formed a different group, which was called the Branch Davidians. And then later on, that turned into David Koresh, and we all know what happened in '93 with the Branch Davidians at Waco. But
the church fathers got rid of heretical Gnostic Christianity and created Orthodox Christianity. The Protestant reformers attacked the Catholic Church. When Islam arose, Muhammad's descendants perpetuated the purist Shia Islam. Then the Sunnis came up with the Hadiths and separated off into Sunni, and they've been killing each other ever since. And it's just like The Godfather, as we've been saying. It's a mafia, and it requires obedience and a code and a certain law that has to be followed, which is issued forth from the divine messianic king. and only he has communication and is the mediator. And the Egyptians had the Pharaoh as the intermediary. He was supposedly born of Ra as the father, sleeping with his mother. And he knew the divine law and could intervene on the behalf of humanity and be the mediator and receive the divine instructions from above, from Ra, and issue them to the people. Moses played the same game, and that they're just copying what has happened before.
That's exactly right. And this new Ashtar Command cult, right, also had that Robert Short created after Van Tassel, accused him of fake Ashtar messages. Many predictions came up out of
Not that he
that.
was making everything up, but
Right.
but that Ashtar wasn't telling him. Instead, Ashtar was telling me.
Yep. And they had predictions like the immediate rescue of humanity by Ashtar Command ships that would arrive in a space fleet and would be in the near future. And many of
Hustlers
these
always try to create fear in someone. A good salesman will always try to make you afraid of something so that you buy their product and then save yourself, and will present himself as your savior and your bodyguard who's going to protect you from all these dangers that surround you.
But this Ashtar Command cult did something that a lot of the other cults didn't do, right? In order to cover up all their failed predictions, right? They decided to use the internet in the mid to late 90s and basically render all of the previous channeled Ashtar Cosmic Command messages invalid, right? They claimed that these other Ashtar channelers that were predicting the end of the world and all these Ashtar ships had been hijacked by a breakaway Ashtar Command evil space alien race that was trying to deceive humanity, right? So they did what the Heaven's Gate cult did whenever the media scrutiny got too much. They whipped out a 12-step criteria to follow. And if you don't follow that, then your channel messages from Ashtar are invalid and they don't count.
The early Christians did the same thing with Orthodox Christianity. When the Gnostics failed to convince enough people that they were evil and shouldn't have children and should disappear from the earth, Orthodox Christianity stepped in, and the Bible itself made all the predictions that within the lifetime of the apostles, Jesus would return, and all of this end of the age and the new age would begin within the lifetime of the apostles. And none of that happened. And then Orthodox Christianity stepped in to discount all those failed prophecies and try to explain them away with the dogma of the popes and of the church fathers. And the same thing happened in Merkava mysticism, and the Talmud itself explains away the idea that the Messiah has not arrived, either because the world has not become completely evil or completely good, and that they have to get all their people to study the Torah, or inversely, they have to make the world entirely evil for the Messiah to arrive. And they explain away all their failed prophecies and pin the blame on their own people by saying they either have not been evil enough or devout enough, and they have to pursue one path or the other. And Yahweh does the same thing. He destroyed the temples and created the diasporas by blaming the people for his lack of power as the ultimate God of all the gods, and it is a polytheistic religion. He doesn't blame himself for his failure to make all the world under his religion. He blames his chosen people and punishes them by destroying their temple and chasing them to the four corners of the flat earth, instead of asserting his own power over all the other gods and destroying the temples of all the other gods and scattering the other peoples. He gets his own people to be harmed and destroyed. It's really vicious. It's insane that anyone accepts all of it as if it were real.
Yes, Anna, that is the Heaven's Gate cult that did that. Yes. Um,
Heaven's Gate, they all committed suicide, and they assisted one another to commit suicide in sequence. They would take poison and then put plastic bags over their head to asphyxiate themselves. And then those who remained would put blankets over to give some dignity to the corpse. And eventually, I think there were 2 or 3 at the very end who had no one to do that for them.
so this Ashtar Command called, just like Christianity, effectively rebranded themselves, right? They rebranded themselves with a new criteria, new steps to follow, new
New image.
commandments.
The early Christians were perceived as perverse because they would engage in orgies. They refused to have children, and they were really sick-minded people. So Orthodox Christianity had to rebrand it and deny all of the true allegations that these people were sexual deviants and really evil, perverse people, and that all their prophecies had failed.
It's a great way to cover that stuff up, and I hope people were really paying attention to what your comments about that and how things are going to be blamed on the people themselves. I hope people really listen to that and singe that into their heads for the next coming years, because that's exactly what they're going to be doing again. So
Humanity is being blamed for global warming. We're being told that we are overpopulated, that we are an evil force on the earth, and that the solution is to vastly reduce our populations. They are always trying to demean the human form and the human being and make us self-hating, and to view our enemies as if our salvation, because they will do us the justice of exterminating us. And they never point out the evil nature of our enemies, and they never put forward the idea that it is our enemies who have to be destroyed. Instead, they always turn us into self-hatred, which is what Christianity is all about. And now they're doing it to the West, to make the West self-hating, and to invite the idea that the Eurasianists, the behemoth of the Eurasianists, will destroy the Leviathan of the Atlanticists and the West. And they have duped Westerners into becoming self-hating and to inviting in our enemies to annihilate us. It is very sick, perverse mentality. And they use the same playbook to set us up in the same way over and over again. And some of the ufologists do the same thing by saying that humanity is evil, the ETs are our salvation, and they will save us by destroying us and by breeding with us and by changing our genetic makeup.
it's pretty clear to see. So, yes, please listen to what Christopher just said right there. So, this Ashtar Command called effectively rebranded themselves. They did the whole love and light, new age thing, no more prophecies of end of the world, doomsday stuff. That doesn't come true, because if they keep on with these failed predictions, then people are going to realize that they're just making this stuff up. Right, so they just decided to play it safe with one singular Ashtar worldview. Right now, hundreds of people can now claim to channel Ashtar as long as they follow these sets of guidelines on the internet. Right, you can
what's
literally
deeply disturbing. I'm sorry for interrupting you over and over again, but what is so deeply disturbing is that the U.S. government has now adopted the stance that these UFOs are invading our military airspace and are hostile. That means they're setting us up to be attacked in some form. And that is very alarming, and we ought to respond to it before it's too late.
But then that one, I think it was the Aetherius cult, was talking about that prime directive. No, it's this cult. It's the Ashtar Command cult that whenever they rebranded from the Doomsday stuff, they started saying that the Ashtar Command will no longer interfere unless there's a natural disaster or a nuclear war, which is more of this this love and light type of new age nonsense that's constantly being perpetuated from this Ashtar Command cult on the internet. They basically just turned the internet in a way to perpetuate their fake made up beliefs, all the while classifying all the people that came before them, like George Van Tassel and Robert Short and all these people that are doing these predictions, as invalid.
That's also, there was a movie, Hypernormalization, which talked about a post-political world in which humans were led to believe that they have no ability to govern their own fate, and that any efforts to try to improve anything on Earth will only make things worse, and therefore we should leave our fate into the hands of others and allow chaos to dominate, and that there's nothing that can be done ever to organize and work together to improve anything. And they're trying to convince people with this ufology that there are other forces who govern our fate, and therefore we should surrender ourselves to those other forces instead of utilizing our human gifts and our human dignity and our human abilities to utilize our intelligence to govern our own fate and to take our own fate into our own hands, to defend ourselves from our enemies, to become loving creatures and help other human beings to advance humanity in a positive way towards a better future, that we do have the ability to use our brains and our bodies and our intellectual gifts to produce a better future if we stop believing in these mythologies, these faith-based mythologies, which say that we are intellectually inferior and therefore have to surrender our fate either to those who are in communication with these literally higher powers or to these mythical higher powers themselves. That turns us into children who have to obey parents, and those parents aren't our parents. They are instead our enemies who want to destroy us. So we are giving complete political power and military power over to our enemies and pretending to ourselves that we have no ability whatsoever ourselves to govern our own fate. And that is political suicide. And we have to get out of that mindset and do the opposite and start to engage in political organization and to realize and to assert that we ourselves have a right to self-sovereignty and self-determination, and the right and the ability to determine for ourselves what it will be our destiny.
Which is also interesting that you bring up the family and the mother and the father and everything, because the Heaven's Gate cult, T and Do, they were basically telling their followers to abandon their family.
Jesus said the same thing. Nobody who follows their mother or their father can join him. You have to wage war on your own family.
That's what they were saying there. I mean, there's literal video online of Do saying of T and Do saying that what's more important, your family or the kingdom of heaven?
That's exactly what Jesus said. That in order to save your soul, in order to be saved, you had to go to war with your own family. Now, what's interesting about that, well, many things that are important and interesting about that, the Greeks had this concept of metallic ages. And there was the Golden Age, then the Silver Age, then the Bronze Age, the Heroic Age, and finally there would be the Iron Age. And in the Golden Age, nature provided everything. People loved one another. All human beings got along, supported one another, helped one another. Families were solid nuclear families, and everyone was honest and worked towards each other. But as these ages progressed to ultimately the Iron Age, in the Iron Age, everyone would be at one another's throats, and brothers would slaughter brothers, children would hate their parents and fight their parents. And this mythology of the metallic ages was put forward by Hesiod and others, and it was completely copied by Christianity, but Christianity encouraged it. In Matthew 24, and I think in Luke 21, Jesus talks about the coming time of wars and rumors of wars, and he said that's a good thing, and to not be alarmed by it, and to go along with it. And the Muslims also adopted that Hesiod's myth of the Iron Age, and they also predicted the idea that there would come an age when brothers would fight brothers and families would break apart and no human beings would ever be honest, and that everyone would be at one another's throat. And the Talmudists and Kabbalists repeat the same thing.
So this Ashtar Command cult, in 1994, a small group of this Ashtar Command members claimed that they had an extraordinary event take place, right? And they called this event the liftoff experience.
I wonder what they were smoking when they lifted off.
So they communicated via this network on the internet, and they said that this liftoff experience was that they would be placed aboard these Ashtar Command ships of light that were circling the planet.
It all goes back to Ezekiel's chariot. It's Merkavah mysticism, the ascension.
The Galactic Fifth Fleet, right? That would use a physical consciousness transfer of sorts, which would enable them to be raised from this physical dimension and transferred up into the light ships. Right? And then a second event was then predicted in 94 with over 250 people that participated. And this was claimed that the Ashtar Command cult opened up a portal. They opened up a portal to the Ashtar Command light ship. And it was claimed that in order to participate, a person's vibrational frequency had to be at a certain level, just like George Van Tassel talks about the vibrational frequency, just like the other guy, what was his name?
There was a Raymond Rife guy who forecast that disease could be cured through resonant frequencies. There are resonant frequencies, and our cell phones work off of resonant frequencies, and all of that technology is real. But then to transplant that into higher dimensions and extraterrestrials is complete nonsense. And it's easy to laugh at these people and to say that they're gullible, and that it's ridiculous that they believe it, and that intellectuals could never believe it. But many major religions say exactly those same things. All the people who believe in the rapture believe in the exact same theology. Merkavah mysticism is the exact same theology. The Egyptians and their idea of taking this journey after you're dead and utilizing the book of spells to know how to journey through to the other world. It's the same type of mythology. The Orphics and their golden tablet believed in the same thing, and they were highly intellectual people. So it seems that humanity has a need and a vulnerability to want to accept these types of myths because we're so fearful of death. And the Orphics understood that fear of death, and they said that was what bound us to the body and the lusts of the body. That the body is afraid it will die, so it provides us with the lust to eat, the lust to sleep, the lust to love a woman and bear children, and that all these things inhibit the soul from escaping the body and reuniting ecstatically with God. And so that is the basis for this death wish, that this world is material and evil, and that we have to have a death wish because death then becomes life. And these are stupid ancient mythologies which human beings are gullible and have a need to pursue. And the way to get people out of cults is to expose how asinine these beliefs are, how obviously false these beliefs are, and to get together in groups to do that. Human beings are often herd animals and will follow whatever the herd does. And the cults always try to surround and separate people so that they cannot communicate with rational, sane people. And they're now trying to do that on the internet with ufologists and flat earth people. They try to swarm in a herd, in a swarm, to isolate people and to attack them and to force them into accepting these cultic mythologies and create these cults and separate people out from anyone who provides a sane, rational voice.
I think, Christopher, that it comes down to the need and the want to believe in something outside of yourself, and that has been programmed into us since we first started on this planet. I think this idea and a notion of that we need someone to save us, and that's looked at in a physical form through these cults, through these cult leaders, through these self-proclaimed prophets. And then it's also looked at in a spiritual form, that after you die, you will be saved and you will go to some place that is better than this. Well, I don't know anything better than this. I think
Amen.
this is what's going on right now. This is the best thing that we got.
If you want to look for something spiritual, beautiful, mystical, wonderful, look to your own life. The miracle of existing, the miracle of the world, the miracle of moving through time and forever changing, and have the opportunity to make amends for mistakes, and the beauty of falling in love with other human beings, the beauty of having children. It is so wonderful and miraculous. And it is only by stigmatizing it as if it's evil that we develop this need to look for an alternative. If you want to see something that's miraculous, look at your own hand and how your mind can cause your hand to move and obey what it is that your mind instructs it to do. These are all things which are not understood and are which beautiful, beautiful things. Look at a flower, look at birds, look at life. Go into nature and feel the beauty and splendor of nature. That's another horrible thing of what computers and computer screens and monitors and now provision and virtual reality glasses is depriving us from. Our consciousness communicates with the outside world on many, many levels. And computer screens in no way can replicate that body language and that communication that takes place between our consciousness and nature itself. When we go into a beautiful forest or explore canyons or look at a wonderful, magnificent sunset or talk to one another face to face, there are levels of communication that computer communication cannot replicate. And we are destroying and atrophying those parts of our minds which communicate on those levels. And we're dying. Our souls are dying by not communicating on those levels, both with nature and with one another.
I agree so much, Christopher. We're coming up on 2 hours here. I think this is a great place to end it. I appreciate you a lot, my friend. And Nina, thanks so much for the kind and generous $3 super sticker. Your kindness and generosity is always appreciated. Thanks so much. Christopher, let people know where they can find you online, brother.
I have a YouTube channel, which is CJB Books. With no spaces. It's my initials, CJB Books. I have a website, cjbbooks.com. I'm on Twitter as CJB Books. Those are the best ways to find me. If you want to look into my research and my books, please visit my website, cjbbooks.com. If you can, I have donation links beneath each title. Please, if you're interested in these kinds of concepts, a lot of what I've been talking about is found in my books, Beware the World to Come and Rise Above the Gods Who Hate Us. In Rise Above the Gods Who Hate Us, I talk a lot about this Neoplatonistic philosophy of emanation, ascension, epistrophe and descension. And if that's something you're interested in, I suggest you pick up my book, Rise Above the Gods Who Hate Us. And I want to thank you, Ryder Lee, once again for having me on. It's been a wonderful conversation. And I think we have delved into this on a level that nobody else in the world ever has. And I hope that this inspires people to take it further and to use our talk as a point of departure to go even further.
I agree so much, brother. Let's do it again sometime soon. I really appreciate you. I really appreciate everyone in the chat. What's going on, Master? Good to see you. Jenna Banana, Scotty Boy, and Trina Phoenix, Experimental Elemental. Good to see you guys. And we got a super chat from Marissa. Thanks so much. Appreciate all you do, Ryder. Thanks so much for your kind and generous $10 super chat. Marissa, appreciate you a lot. I should be back with, I'm going to do a big study into the Heaven's Gate cult, and that should be on Thursday, I believe. So keep a lookout for that. All of the links to Christopher's information will be in the description of this video. Thank you all so much.
A heads up later today, if I can get to it, or tomorrow, I'm going to be doing a video exposing where the flat earth comes from, the Freemasons and the Kabbalists who came up with this flat earth idea, and their political methods for trying to force people to enter into this cult, and the way that they harass and ridicule people who don't go along with their mythologies.
Yes, that would be, I think the whole flat earth thing is a huge psyop and a huge scam. But, and it's been continuously perpetuated. I'll be looking for that video as well. Maybe I'll bring you back on and we can talk about it.
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day, and I'll see you all on Thursday.
Goodbye, everyone.